Tonight, we walk a marble corridor lit by candles that never seem to melt. Keys whisper against iron doors. Ledgers breathe like sleeping animals. Gold glimmers in the dark, but the hush is older than the coins. We begin inside the hush, not at the altar, but behind it. A narrow stair, a door with no name. The air smells of stone and old paper. You feel the cool weight of history on your skin. This is not a chase. It is a slow turning of pages. We trace the path of gifts, taxes, treaties, and tides of empire. We follow ships that never returned and coins that never saw daylight. We listen for the soft click of safes in rooms without windows. We do not accuse, we observe. We gather the fragments. We let the silence speak. You'll hear of vaults that hold art more than money, and of ledgers that count power more than price. We touch stories of indulgences, relic markets, and crusade spoils told in a low voice. We pause by treaties signed in hotel rooms, and by banks that failed under moonlight. We feel the pull of names, Medici, Ambrosiano, Lateran. We note what is certain and what is only said. We keep the tone gentle. This is a sleep story, not a trial. Faith and wealth share a long corridor. One door opens to devotion, another to influence. Between them, stewards, scribes, and the patient math of centuries. Gold is loud by day. At night, it is the quiet wait inside a box. As you drift, we guide you through hidden passageways. The value of a chalice, the price of a treaty, the cost of silence. We meet archivists who memorize dust. We sit with guards who know which steps creak. We pass the art that cannot move and the coins that never stop. Rest, breathe, the story will not run. It waits in cool stone, and it has waited a long time. The stair hides in shadow. Few notice it. It begins not in the grand nave, but in the hush behind, where walls meet at angles that seem almost accidental. A narrow descent. Stone worn smooth by centuries of passing feet, though the number of those who walked here has always been few. The air is cooler. You feel the weight of stone close around you. At first, there is little to see. A simple lantern casts its circle, and within it, dust dances like slow snow. Then, as your eyes adjust, you begin to notice shapes. A door plain, almost unmarked, as if designed to be forgotten. It has no title, no carving of saints or symbols, no gilded frame, only iron hinges and a handle darkened by the oil of many cautious hands. It does not announce itself, yet the silence around it has the density of secrecy. You sense that what lies beyond is not meant for all. It is meant for record keepers, for guardians of numbers, and objects too heavy for light. A key turns somewhere nearby. The sound is slow, deliberate, as though the motion itself carries reverence. The door shifts. A breath of colder air seeps out, carrying with it the faint scent of wax and old metal. You step forward. The space you enter feels like a pause in time. It is not dramatic. There are no golden walls or treasures spilling in heaps. Instead, there are shelves, long and high, lined with boxes and ledgers. The wealth here is not only coins, but the memory of coins. It is wealth in the form of records, pages filled with numbers, promises, transfers, names. Each box is sealed with twine. Each shelf sags slightly under the patient weight. To the left, a table holds balances and scales, their brass dull with age. To the right, a small crucifix watches from the wall, as though blessing even the counting of silver. What you feel is not spectacle, but stillness. This is where silence has been stored. This is where the Church, for centuries, placed what it could not display, the exact measure of what it owns, the weight of what it guards, the evidence of what it has received. You imagine a clerk, centuries ago, entering this very chamber, his sandals scraping against the stone, his hands holding candles. He writes with quill and ink, noting not prayers but payments. His script curves gently, and with each stroke another coin is remembered. He is not a priest at the altar. His liturgy is of numbers. His service is accuracy. There is peace in this kind of labour. The peace of knowing that nothing escapes the record. Even silence leaves a line. The door closes softly behind you. You do not feel trapped. Instead, you feel invited into a rhythm older than your own heartbeat. The hush deepens. You sense that what is here will not be hurried, and that time itself respects this room. Rest here. Listen to the breathing of the shelves. Each box, each ledger, holds not just figures, but echoes of decisions, choices of kings, tithes of peasants, tributes of generals. All gathered, all sleeping now, behind the door with no name. And you too are invited to sleep, not to escape, but to join this chamber's long vigil, where silence is wealth and wealth is silence. The sound of metal touching metal is small, but it carries. In these corridors, even the faintest chime of keys seems amplified, as if the walls lean closer to listen. You picture the hand that holds them, not adorned with jewels, not grand, simply steady, perhaps older, perhaps calloused. The ring itself is heavy, circling with iron and brass teeth of every shape and size. Each one cut for a different door, each one a map of access known to only a few. A key is never only metal, it is permission. It is trust woven into shape. It is silence agreed upon. The man or woman carrying this ring does not walk quickly. Their pace is slow, measured. Their footsteps echo as though marking time itself. The keys sway at the hip, clicking softly. One is long and slender, designed for a door now centuries old. Another is squat and thick, made for a modern vault. Between them hang layers of history, each tooth a fragment of the church's guarded wealth. Imagine the nightly routine. The keeper walks the halls when the crowds are gone. Candles flicker low. He stops before a door, selects the correct key by touch alone. A pause. Then the key slides in, turning with deliberate care. The lock responds like an old friend, sighing open. Inside waits not spectacle, but another room of patience. Ledgers, coins, or perhaps simply space meant to be filled one day. Keys are passed rarely. From one hand to another, across decades or centuries, each bearer carries not only metal, but burden. The burden of knowing what lies behind doors the world will never see. Sometimes the keeper sits alone. He removes the ring from his belt, sets it gently on a wooden table. He studies the metal shapes, their teeth jagged like small mountains. He knows them as others know prayers. Each has a story. Each opens not only a door but a memory of what has been placed behind it. You hear them rattle again. The sound is calming, almost like wind chimes in a quiet courtyard. But unlike wind, these notes do not drift away. They anchor you here, in the hush of stone and lock, in the slow assurance that what is meant to stay hidden will remain so, until another key bearer is chosen. The ring is lifted once more, steps retreat into shadow, and you, listening, carry the echo of those keys into your own rest, knowing that some doors are meant never to be forced, only entrusted. The book lies open on a desk worn smooth by centuries of elbows and ink stains. Its pages are thick, yellowed at the edges, their surface faintly rippled by the air of countless seasons. A faint scent of parchment and dust rises, soft and steady. You lean closer. The ink has not faded as much as you expect. The script is careful, flowing, written by a hand trained not in poetry but precision. Each line carries a date. Beside it, a number. Beside that, a name. The rhythm continues, row after row, until the page feels less like paper and more like breathing. The ledger breathes in the sense that it holds life within it. These numbers once represented food on tables, stone laid for walls, armies sent or recalled. The coins recorded here were not abstractions. They were sweat, harvest, tribute, belief. To read them is to hear the hum of centuries of exchange. Turn a page, another list, more names, more numbers. Some amounts are small, like whispers. A few are vast, like thunder captured on the line of a quill. Yet the tone of the writing never changes. Calm, neutral. The scribe did not judge. He only noted. His task was not drama, but accuracy. The book rests on wooden blocks. Its weight is such that one cannot lift it easily. That is fitting, for what it contains is heavy, not in mass but in meaning. To run your hand across its surface is to feel the pulse of hidden history. The warmth of lives long gone still lingers here. The ledger breathes because it continues. It is not locked in the past. Its patterns repeat in newer books, in digital echoes today. Income and expense, gift and debt. A rhythm that never ends, only changes its script. The room is still. A candle flickers. The flame bends as though listening to the soft rustle when a page turns. In that sound lies centuries of silence, centuries of voices now quiet but still inscribed. You rest your hand gently on the margin. No need to read further. The knowledge here is endless, and you are not asked to master it. You are asked only to know it exists. That wealth is not only in coins, but in the record of them. That memory itself is treasure. The ledger waits. It will outlast the candle. It will outlast the desk. It will outlast us. And tonight, as your own breath slows, you may feel yourself become part of its rhythm. Another page in silence, another line in the book that breathes. The hall is wide, but the light is dim. Shafts of sunlight fall only where windows allow, high above, cutting across stone like golden ribbons. Along the length of the chamber stand tables, low and simple, bearing objects that do not speak yet tell their story silently. Some are coins, stacked in uneven towers. Their edges are rubbed smooth by the hands of those who offered them centuries ago. Others are jewels, their brilliance dulled not by time but by reverence, locked away from daylight so their shine belongs only to memory. There are tapestries folded, chalices resting, rings laid carefully upon cloth. Each one arrived here in a different year, under a different sky, from hands of every class, kings and queens, farmers and widows, generals and pilgrims. The chair of Peter has always been more than a seat. It is a symbol, a centre of faith. And with faith, gifts arrive, some given in gratitude, others in fear, many in hope. Each offering was not merely an object, but a fragment of devotion. Yet once given, devotion transforms into wealth, and wealth must be counted. Picture a winter long ago. A widow walks through the gates of Rome. Her cloak is thin, the cold air biting her skin. In her palm rests a single coin. To her it is much. She presses it into the hand of a priest. It disappears into a chest that holds thousands more. To her, it was an act of faith. To the church, it becomes a line in a ledger, a gift added to the weight of others. Now imagine a monarch. He arrives with retinue, his banners trailing in the wind. He kneels, but not empty-handed. A crown of emeralds, a sword gilded with silver, a coffer filled with gold florins. He offers these not only as devotion, but as alliance, expecting favour, expecting voice. The chair receives, as it has always received. The ledger accepts both the widow's coin and the king's chest without judgment. Numbers do not weigh intent. They only record. The gifts become symbols. Each chalice holds wine on the altar, but its gold once belonged to another treasury. Each tapestry decorates a wall, but its threads once warmed a private hall. All are transformed in the act of giving. Faith sanctifies the transaction, but silence preserves it. There are stories that linger. One tells of a duke who, facing defeat, sent his last fortune to Rome. He died in battle, but his name lived on, inked neatly on parchment. Another speaks of a sailor who carried pearls from the east, handing them over in gratitude for safe passage across the seas. Those pearls rest in the dark still, their sheen unseen, their story unsung except here. The chair never asked for every gift. Many came uninvited, driven by conscience or fear. Yet once placed upon the altar or within the chest, each gift became permanent. To return, it would be to undo the devotion, and devotion cannot be undone. The chamber where these offerings lie is not grand, its stones are plain, its ceiling low, yet within its silence rest centuries of wealth gathered by the hands of the faithful. There is no sound but the soft creak of wood, the rustle of parchment as scribes record another gift. The gifts are countless, too many to name, too many to display. They are catalogued in books that line the walls. One after another, the records continue, filling pages with notations of crowns, coins, jewels, land. Every item entered, every donor remembered. You close your eyes, and you see them. Pilgrims walking by candlelight, kings bowing in ceremony, widows pressing coins into trembling hands. All vanish into silence, yet their gifts remain, eternal, breathing through ledgers and vaults. Here, in this chamber, you rest. You let the hush settle around you. The weight of centuries presses softly, not heavily, upon your chest. You sleep beside the chair's gifts, knowing they have been waiting for centuries and will wait centuries more. A reliquary glimmers in dim light, not with the brilliance of gold alone, but with the aura of reverence. Within it lies a fragment, a bone, a cloth, a sliver of wood said to be sacred. Pilgrims once lined roads for days to see it, to touch it, to leave their offerings beside it. Relics are not only symbols of faith, they are magnets of devotion. Where they rest, crowds gather, and where crowds gather, coins follow, inns fill, markets thrive, offerings overflow. The relic itself may be priceless in the sense that it cannot be bought, yet around it grows an economy of faith. Imagine a small village. For years its church was simple, its pews half empty. Then, one winter, word spread that a fragment of a saint's garment had arrived. Pilgrims began to travel. The village inn grew full, merchants arrived with wares, and the small church found itself heavy with coins left at the altar. Faith turned to revenue, not by design, but by inevitability. In Rome, the relics multiplied. Each shrine carried not only spiritual power, but also financial gravity. The faithful would press coins into boxes, light candles for payment, purchase tokens to remember the visit. The church never denied devotion, but devotion needed caretaking. Caretakers required payment. Payment became steady flow. Not all relics were genuine. This too is whispered in archives. Traders sold false bones, counterfeit cloths, manufactured shards of wood said to be from the true cross. Some relics travelled on markets as freely as spices or silk, yet once housed within a reliquary, real or imagined, the relic drew the faithful gave, and the ledgers filled. Stories tell of merchants who carried bones across borders, wrapped in velvet, presented as treasures, of dukes who exchanged relics as gifts to secure alliances, of bishops who negotiated for the transfer of sacred items in exchange for coin. Each story reminds you that relics were not only symbols of holiness, but also tokens of wealth. You picture a reliquary opened in candlelight. Within it rests a small fragment. The air is heavy with incense. Outside, pilgrims wait, holding coins in their hands, ready to place them on the altar. Inside, scribes stand nearby, noting amounts, adding lines to ledgers that breathe. The relic does not change. The fragment remains still, silent, unmoving. Yet, around it, a world stirs. The noise of coins dropped into boxes, the shuffle of feet, the quiet prayers whispered into wood. The relic gathers all of it without motion. There is reverence here, but also rhythm. The relic holds faith, and faith calls forth revenue. The balance is delicate. One sustains the other, each quiet, each enduring. Close your eyes. Imagine the reliquary glimmering faintly in the corner of the room. See the faithful bow. Hear their coins fall. Let the rhythm lull you. The relic does not move, yet it has drawn countless footsteps. Tonight, it draws you too, into silence, into rest. The parchment lies flat on the desk, its edges curling slightly with age. Words written in Latin move across the page in careful strokes. At the bottom, a seal pressed deep into red wax, the indulgence. A promise of pardon, granted by authority, sealed by faith. Once, these documents were not rare. They flowed like quiet rivers across Europe. A coin here, a coin there, and forgiveness was offered. For the Church, indulgences became not only acts of mercy, but also streams of income. Picture a small chapel in winter. A priest sits at a table, the flicker of candlelight reflecting off his inkpot. Villagers approach, each carrying a coin. They place it down. He nods. He writes. He seals. For them, relief of guilt. For the Church, another line in a book, another addition to the treasury. In great cities, indulgence sales grew larger. Merchants offered them in squares. Heralds announced them in streets. Coins flowed like rain into chests. The money was not always used for luxury. Often, it built walls, repaired churches, funded journeys, but no matter its destination, its source was pardon-priced. Not all saw it as sacred. Whispers grew. Some questioned whether forgiveness could be written on parchment. Some wondered why mercy carried a cost. Yet, the coins continued, the seals pressed, the parchments stacked in vaults. The rhythm endured until the whispers became louder, until reform shook the silence. But here, in this chamber, the indulgences rest. Their ink faded but still legible, each one a promise, each one a payment. They lie in boxes now, tied with string, stacked neatly on shelves. You lift one, it feels lighter than you expect, fragile, almost brittle, yet its weight is not in its paper but in its meaning. For centuries, people gave coins for these words, trusting them as bridges to salvation. You imagine the coins exchanged for this very document. Small, worn pieces of metal, now long gone, melted, spent, reminted, yet the parchment remains, carrying within it the echo of that exchange. The room is silent. The indulgence in your hand seems to breathe faintly, as though the voices of those who once held it still linger in the fibres. You place it back gently, tie the box once more, and feel the hush return. The price of pardon was never small, yet it was always given. Tonight, you too may release what weighs upon you, not with coin, not with seal, but with breath. Exhale, let go. Rest in the hush, where forgiveness is not purchased but found in silence. The road is long, and dust rises softly with every step. Across centuries, thousands of feet have walked here bare, sandaled, shod in leather worn thin. The path is not only earth and stone, it is memory pressed down, layer by layer, until each pebble carries the echo of devotion. Pilgrims moved like rivers. From villages, from cities, from kingdoms far away, they streamed toward shrines and basilicas. They walked through forests where birds sang at dawn, through valleys where mist lingered, through deserts where sun burned their backs. Always forward, always toward a destination promised to be holy. Along the way, the road transformed. Inns grew where once there had been only huts. Markets flourished where once there had been empty fields. Merchants stood ready with bread, candles, tokens, images, amulets. The pilgrim roads became arteries, carrying not just faith but wealth. You imagine a pilgrim from the north. He carries little, only a cloak and a pouch. Inside the pouch, a few coins saved through years of work. Each coin is meant not for himself, but for the shrine ahead. Yet before he arrives, the road takes much of it. A meal here, a bed there, a carved token for his children, a candle to burn in memory of the dead. Every coin placed into a hand becomes another entry in the great unseen ledger. The pilgrim does not think of it as wealth. He thinks of it as devotion. But the innkeeper counts. The merchant notes. The shrine gathers. The road itself becomes a channel where devotion flows into economy. By the time he arrives in Rome, his pouch is light. He kneels at the steps of the basilica, places his last coin into a box, and feels relief. That coin will not be seen again, yet its presence remains. For centuries, such coins gathered, pouring into treasuries, feeding the silence of vaults. The pilgrim roads were not only paths for feet, but lines of exchange. Kings knew this, bishops knew this. Along these roads, they built hostels, hospitals, chapels, each one a station where devotion turned to coin. At night, when the roads grew quiet, only the sound of wind and crickets remained. In the stillness, you can imagine the murmur of voices from long ago. Pilgrims whispering prayers before sleep, merchants counting their earnings, innkeepers extinguishing candles one by one. The road rests, but its memory remains alive. Even today, the stones remember. You could walk them and feel the imprint of countless journeys. The roads carry the weight, not of armies, but of faith. Faith that paid for bread, for beds, for relics, for candles, for walls that still stand. You rest in the image of the pilgrim roads, endless, quiet, lined with shadows of devotion. They guide you into stillness, into a sleep as gentle as the dust settling back upon stone. Beyond Rome's walls stretched lands once ruled directly by the Church. The Papal States, a patchwork of fields, towns, fortresses, not simply spiritual, but temporal, earthly, governed as any kingdom must be with taxes, rents, tolls, and soldiers. Picture the countryside in harvest. Wheat bends under wind, vineyards shimmer in late light, olive groves whisper with leaves. Farmers bend their backs, gathering crops. Yet before the grain is baked into bread, before the wine is poured into cups, a portion belongs elsewhere, a tithe to the local parish, a levy to the steward, and higher still, a share to Rome. The purse of the Papal States was filled not only by gifts of kings or coins of pilgrims, but by the daily labour of peasants. Each sack of grain carried on the back of a mule echoed down the chain until it reached the vaults. Each vineyard pressed its fruit not only into barrels but into accounts. Tolls collected at bridges, and gates became another steady stream. Travellers moving through the papal lands paid for passage. Merchants carrying cloth, salt, or spice dropped coins at checkpoints. These coins travelled quietly into coffers. Rents came from noble families who held estates under papal protection. Castles, farms, villages, all bound by agreements that required payments in silver or service. Some offered men-at-arms in lieu of gold. The church counted both, for soldiers were wealth too. The papal purse grew heavy. With it came responsibility, to defend walls, to feed soldiers, to repair aqueducts and roads, to maintain hospitals, churches, monasteries. Every coin that entered was counted. Every coin that left was recorded. The treasury became not only a chest, but a heartbeat. In dark halls, scribes bent over parchment, listing revenues from across the states. Bologna, Perugia, Ferrara. Each name followed by amounts, neat lines of ink. The sound of quills scratching was as steady as rainfall. The Papal States' purse was vast, but it was fragile too. Wars could drain it, famine could thin it, corruption could weaken it. And yet, through centuries, it endured. The land fed the church, and the church guarded the land. The balance was delicate but lasting. At night, the countryside grew quiet. Farmers rested after harvest. Soldiers kept watch at gates. Priests tallied tithes by candlelight. The purse, unseen, lay heavy with the weight of countless lives. You imagine yourself as one of those scribes, writing by lamplight. The numbers blur into rhythm. 10 sacks of grain, 20 barrels of wine, 30 florins in tolls. You write until the ink grows thin, until sleep takes you. And even as you sleep, the purse continues to fill. The Papal States are gone now, dissolved into history. But their purse, their rhythm of rent and toll and tithe, echoes still in the vaults. The silence of the treasury remembers. And tonight, as your breath steadies, you too fall into the rhythm of that ancient purse, counting softly until sleep. Florence, the city of bankers, artists, and intrigue. Among its families, one name rose above all, Medici. To speak it, was to speak of money woven into power, of credit stretched like invisible threads across kingdoms. The Medici did not simply count coins. They created systems where coins multiplied. Their banks reached across Europe, ledgers filled with names of kings, dukes, merchants, and within these ledgers lay the Vatican's own accounts. The chair of Peter required funds beyond what pilgrims and peasants could offer. Wars needed paying, cathedrals needed building, alliances needed sealing. For this, the Medici hands were steady and skilled. They extended credit, shifted gold across borders, balanced books that spanned continents. You imagine a Medici banker seated at a wooden desk, quill in hand. He leans over parchment, noting amounts in careful script. On the page, two names meet, a king in France and a pope in Rome. Between them lies the banker's ink, the promise of funds, the trust of repayment. Credit was invisible yet powerful. A line in a ledger could move armies, erect basilicas, settle treaties. The Medici understood this. They knew that faith required stone, and stone required silver. Their hands guided both. Not all was clean. Some debts soured, some accounts bled, but the relationship endured. The Vatican's gold often passed through Medici vaults, their fingers counting, their minds calculating. The Medici did not only serve the church, they shaped it. One of their own became Pope Leo X, his reign remembered for both splendor and controversy. Under him, indulgences were sold to fund St. Peter's Basilica, a decision that shook Christendom to its core. Behind the grandeur, behind the controversy, the Medici hands moved quietly, calculating the costs, ensuring the flow of funds. The Medici palaces still stand, their walls adorned with frescoes, their chambers echoing with past conversations. Within them, deals were struck, accounts reconciled, futures decided. The Vatican was never far from these rooms. At night, Florence quieted. The river Arno reflected the moon, the markets emptied, the streets grew still. In a chamber lit by oil lamps, a banker sat alone. Before him, a ledger. In the margin, a line noting sums for Rome. He wrote until his hand grew heavy, then closed the book. That ledger may sleep now in an archive. Its ink faded, its edges curled. Yet the numbers it carried once built cathedrals, crowned popes, shaped the destiny of nations. The Medici hands touched the Vatican not only in gold, but in history. Their fingers left imprints on doors that still stand, on vaults that still lock. They remind us that wealth is not always in coins alone, but in the invisible trust that allows coins to move unseen. You close your eyes. You feel the weight of a coin passed from palm to palm, then disappearing into books, into banks, into history. The Medici hands still linger, steady and patient, guiding you now into sleep. The chalice rests upon a cloth of deep red. Its stem is worn where countless hands have lifted it, its bowl dulled by centuries of lips touching its rim. At first, it seems an object of pure devotion, sacred, untouchable. Yet beneath the light of candle and flame, it reveals itself as something more. It is gold, it is weight, it is wealth transformed into holiness. Every chalice once had another life. Some began as coins melted in furnaces, hammered and reshaped into vessels. Others were gifts from kings and nobles, offered not only for faith but for favour. Each metal surface, each gem encrusted along the rim, carries the quiet memory of mines dug, merchants paid, ships sailed, and hands that once held these objects before they were sanctified. Chains too lie within the treasury. Some adorn reliquaries, others rest in boxes, unused but recorded. Heavy, thick, iron or gold, each link once held meaning. A chain across a chest, a chain across a prisoner, a chain across a door. Melted, reforged, they became symbols of authority, sometimes even ornaments of devotion. In the treasury's silence, chalices and chains sit side by side, both metal, both crafted with intention, both holding stories of labour, of suffering, of offerings transformed. Imagine the workshops centuries ago. Flames roar, bellows pump, hammers strike. A goldsmith, hands blackened with soot, bends over his work. He does not see a chalice yet. He sees only molten gold, flowing like sunlight captured in liquid form. He shapes it, cools it, polishes it, and at last delivers it to the church. In a single moment, it shifts from commerce to sacrament. The chalice is lifted at Mass, the wine it holds no longer seen as mere drink. The faithful kneel, unaware of its weight as wealth, its story as metal. They see only the sacred. Yet the treasury records both. Chains tell a quieter story, carried from conquered lands, taken from noble houses, donated or seized. They entered the vault, not as symbols of bondage, but as metal to be repurposed. Sometimes melted into bells, sometimes recast into reliquaries, always transformed, always recorded. There is a duality here. Sacred objects that were once commodities, commodities that became sacred objects. The Church, in its silence, understood both truths. Close your eyes. Imagine shelves lined with chalices, each one unique, each one heavy with history. Some sparkle with gems, others remain plain, their beauty lying in simplicity. Between them, chains coil like sleeping serpents, links cold, patient, unspoken. Together they tell a story, faith and wealth bound inseparably. One does not erase the other. Both remain, side by side, waiting in the hush of the treasury. You feel the weight of this silence pressing gently against your thoughts. It invites you not to judge, but to listen. To understand that gold and iron, devotion and power, are threads of the same cloth. As you drift deeper, chalices and chains fade into stillness, and the hush of centuries guides you toward rest. The parchment is brittle, its ink faded but not gone. Across its surface, lists appear, names of knights, tallies of horses, crates of grain, chests of coin. It is not poetry. It is not prayer. It is accounting the record of crusades. The crusades are often remembered in stories of banners, swords, battles. Yet behind each battle was a ledger. Wars were not fought only with steel but with silver. Ships needed building, soldiers needed pay, armies needed bread, oil, and water. Each item carried cost, and each cost found its way into these accounts. Picture a medieval harbour at dawn. Ships creak against wooden docks. Men load barrels of wine, sacks of grain, bundles of arrows. On a nearby table sits a scribe, quill in hand, recording each item as it disappears into the hull. A chest of coins is carried aboard, its lock sealed with wax. The scribe notes it carefully. Amount, owner, purpose. The ink dries, the ledger breathes. When the Crusaders marched, the costs multiplied. A knight might sell land to finance his journey, donating a portion to the church for blessing. Merchants advanced goods in return for promises of repayment. Princes pledged fortunes. Some coins came freely, as gifts from the faithful, dropped into chests during sermons. Others were extracted as taxes, demanded by rulers to fund holy war. The Vatican received both streams. Donations flowed into its treasuries, blessings granted in return. Taxes passed through, recorded in books, forwarded to armies. And through it all, clerks bent over parchment, noting with precision. Many of these crusade accounts remain. They tell of immense wealth moving in silence. They reveal promises unfulfilled, debts unpaid, fortunes lost in deserts or at sea. They carry names of men who never returned, their coins spent long before their lives ended. Not all wealth reached the Holy Land. Some remained in Europe, diverted into cathedrals, monasteries, vaults. The accounts do not judge, they simply list. A donation here, a shipment there, an expense noted, a surplus recorded. Imagine holding one of these ledgers, its cover cracked, its pages smelling of dust and ink. You turn a leaf and read. 500 marks for horses, 200 for bread, 1,000 for ships. The numbers are calm, but behind each one lies the roar of armies, the clash of swords, the silence of graves. At night, after the noise of battle faded, after the ships rested at anchor, after the soldiers slept under stars, scribes still worked. By candlelight, they recorded each expense, each delivery, each debt. Their quills scratched like steady rain, their hands tired but faithful to the task. In the treasury, these accounts now lie forgotten. Boxes filled with parchment, tied with twine, untouched for centuries. They hold no drama, no glory, no tales of conquest, only numbers. Yet those numbers whisper more than swords ever could. They tell of the hidden engine of war, the flow of wealth, the weight of coin, the silence of debt. You close your eyes, you hear the faint creak of ships, the shuffle of parchment, the quiet scratching of quills. The crusade accounts breathe still, their silence heavy, their numbers eternal. They lull you into stillness, guiding you into sleep as the world of ledgers replaces the noise of battle. Far across oceans, sails once caught wind. Ships left European ports carrying priests, soldiers, merchants. Their destinations were distant lands where crosses were planted, where new names were given to old rivers, where churches rose beside markets. The missions carried faith, but faith travelled with cargo. Alongside chalices and vestments came barrels of wine, sacks of grain, crates of cloth. Missionaries baptized, but they also traded. The line between sacred and economic blurred until the two became inseparable. In the Americas, coins of silver poured from mines into chests, then into ships. Some of that silver found its way to Rome, carried as tithes, offerings, or gifts. In Asia, spices and silks moved through mission channels, profits flowing into treasuries. In Africa, gold and ivory passed through ports, blessed by chapels, their wealth recorded in quiet books. The missions were not wealthy themselves. Priests often lived simply, slept on wooden boards, ate sparingly. Yet around them, markets thrived. Converts brought gifts. Merchants followed the roads, cleared by mission settlements. Governors taxed the trade. The church received its share, sometimes openly, sometimes silently. Imagine a mission on the edge of a jungle. Its chapel stands small, walls of wood, roof of palm leaves. Inside, a crucifix, a chalice, a Bible worn by travel. Outside, traders exchange goods. A priest blesses them, then steps inside to record the donations. His ink flows quietly, his handwriting steady. Each entry adds to the chain that stretches back across oceans to Rome. The Vatican's ledgers reflect this global web. Coins from Mexico, silk from China, ivory from Africa, grain from distant colonies, each line a whisper of faith and commerce entwined. The markets were loud by day voices bargaining, animals braying, coins clinking. But at night, silence returned. The stalls emptied, fires dimmed, the jungle sang with insects. The mission stood alone under the stars, its records safe inside, its wealth already marked for Rome. These missions tell a story of faith spread across continents, but also of wealth flowing silently alongside. Faith gave purpose, markets gave means. Together, they built a system that endured for centuries, leaving behind cathedrals, universities, treasuries. Close your eyes. Imagine the sound of waves against a ship's hull, the creak of sails, the murmur of prayers spoken in many tongues. Feel the weight of silver bars in a chest, the scent of spices in a cargo hold, the soft rustle of parchment as a scribe records it all. The missions and markets do not shout, they whisper. Their whisper carries across oceans, across centuries, into the vaults of Rome. Tonight, that whisper reaches you. It settles in your breath, guides your mind into stillness, and carries you gently into sleep. The chamber is low and built of stone. It smells faintly of smoke, though no fire burns here now. On the floor, dark stains remain, marks of furnaces long extinguished. You hear nothing but the hum of silence. Yet, if you listen closely, you can almost imagine the sound of hammer on metal, the hiss of molten silver poured into molds, the steady rhythm of minting. Coins were never only commerce, they were voices cast in metal. Each coin carried an image, sometimes of a pope, sometimes of a saint, sometimes of a cross. To hold such a coin was to carry both money and message. Each one declared authority, each one whispered legitimacy. The Vatican's mint was not a place of spectacle. No grand halls, no golden light. It was work, steady and quiet, performed by men with soot-stained hands. The furnaces glowed red. The air grew thick with heat. They poured metal into moulds, struck dies against blanks, counted the coins as they cooled. Each one gleamed at first, fresh and sharp, then dulled as it travelled through countless hands. Imagine a craftsman at his bench. His fingers are calloused, his brow damp with sweat. He lifts a blank disc, places it carefully, strikes with a hammer. The image is pressed, a crest, a cross, a papal seal. The coin is lifted, inspected, set aside. Again and again he repeats the motion. The rhythm becomes his prayer, his devotion, not of words, but of metal. The mint silence hides stories. Some coins were made in abundance, their circulation wide, their sound familiar in markets and streets. Others were struck in secrecy, small batches meant for treaties, bribes, or discreet gifts. Each had its place in the ledger, its presence carefully noted, its absence equally accounted for. Coins from this mint built bridges, paid armies, funded festivals, restored walls. They travelled farther than the men who struck them ever dreamed. Across kingdoms, across seas, into markets in distant lands. And always, when the coins returned, they carried their wear as testimony. Scratches, dents, fingerprints pressed into history. The mint also served as a symbol. To strike coins was to declare sovereignty, to say that Rome was not only a seat of faith, but of power. Each coin was a small proclamation. Here is authority, here is permanence. At night, when the fires dimmed and the tools lay silent, the mint itself seemed to breathe. The air still warm, the anvils cooling, the coins stacked neatly in boxes. The silence was thick, but not empty. It was full of presence, of unseen value waiting to move. You picture a chest filled with these coins. The wood creaks under the weight. Each coin alone is small, but together they are heavy, pressing down like stone. To lift the chest requires strength. To guard it requires vigilance. To spend it requires care. Now the chamber is empty, its work long ended. But the memory remains, the stains on stone, the worn handles of tools, the silence that hums with the echo of struck metal. Close your eyes. Hear the faint clang of hammer and die, the whisper of molten silver cooling, the soft shuffle of coins stacked. Feel the weight of them, the hush of wealth born in secrecy. The quiet mint worked not for glory, but for permanence. Tonight, its silence wraps around you like a cloak, guiding you deeper into rest. In the corner of a dim hall sits a wooden desk, its surface scarred by quills, ink, and time. Upon it rests parchment, stretched flat by weights, beside an inkwell dark as night. Here worked the scribes, the keepers of silence, the writers of truth in numbers. The treasury was not only guarded by walls and locks, but by the careful eyes and hands of scribes. They wrote each entry with precision, no flourish, no embellishment. Dates, amounts, names, purposes. Each line drawn in ink became a thread in the vast tapestry of the Vatican's wealth. Imagine a scribe at work. He dips his quill, shakes off the excess, sets the point against parchment. His hand moves steadily, forming curves and strokes, letters and numerals. Around him, the treasury is silent. No voices, no distraction. Only the sound of scratching, faint but rhythmic, like rain against a window. The scribes did not judge. They did not weigh whether a gift was righteous, whether a tax was fair, whether a payment was moral. They recorded. Their devotion was not in preaching, but in precision. To miss a number was to lose a truth. To forget a line was to let wealth vanish into silence. Some records were vast, thousands of florins, entire estates, shipments of silver from overseas. Others were small, a single coin from a widow, a small candle bought in devotion. Yet each was written with equal care. The ink did not favour the grand over the humble. The ledger welcomed both. Through their hands passed centuries of offerings. Relics accounted, gifts weighed, indulgences tallied, lands measured. The scribe's quills linked together the distant pilgrim, the powerful king, the anonymous merchant. All met on the same page. By candlelight, their eyes grew tired, their fingers cramped, yet they continued. The ink sometimes smeared, the parchment sometimes tore, but the work endured. One line after another, day after day, year after year. Imagine a winter night in Rome. Outside, the city is quiet under frost. Inside, a scribe bends low, breath fogging in the cold air. His candle flickers, his quill scratches, his ink darkens. He writes of coins given for forgiveness, of jewels gifted for favour, of estates surrendered for salvation. Each word is a whisper of wealth, each number a testament of faith. The scribes themselves are forgotten, their names rarely recorded, their lives simple, yet their work remains. The ledgers they filled sleep in archives, their ink faded but legible. They breathe still, carrying the silence of centuries. Close your eyes. Imagine the steady rhythm of quills, the smell of ink, the hush of parchment. Feel the patience of scribes who gave their lives to accuracy. Their devotion was not loud, but deep, not seen, but enduring. Tonight, you rest in their rhythm, your breath joining their silence, your dreams carried on their lines. In vast halls and quiet chapels, paintings hang, frescoes spread across ceilings, sculptures rise from marble. They do not move, they cannot. They are wealth fixed in place, wealth not measured by coin but by permanence. The Vatican holds art beyond measure, works that no chest could contain, no ledger could value fully. Each one a treasure, but not the kind that can be sold or traded. They are bound to walls, bound to stone, bound to history. Imagine standing in the Sistine Chapel. Above you, colours swirl into stories. Figures stretch across the vault. Light and shadow dance in silence. This is wealth, yet not like coins that clink or jewels that glitter in boxes. It is wealth that cannot leave. To remove it would destroy it. To sell it would desecrate it, so it remains eternal. Art came to the Vatican in many ways. Some commissioned, paid for with coins gathered from indulgences or gifts. Some offered by artists seeking patronage. Some taken as tribute or inheritance. Each piece carries not only beauty, but the shadow of its cost. The treasury counts art differently, not in numbers, but in reverence. These works attract pilgrims as relics once did. Their gaze upon Michelangelo's ceiling, Raphael's frescoes, Bernini's sculptures, becomes another form of offering. Coins drop into boxes, tickets purchased, donations given. Art that cannot move still generates wealth by presence alone. At night, the halls are empty. The crowds gone, the whispers of awe faded. The paintings rest in silence. The sculptures cast long shadows under dim lights. The art breathes softly, waiting for dawn. You imagine a painter centuries ago. He climbs scaffolding, brush in hand, colours mixed from minerals and oils. His hand moves steadily, his vision shaping walls into heaven. He does not think of wealth as he paints. Yet his work becomes wealth, wealth that cannot move, wealth that remains forever tied to stone. The silence of art is powerful. It does not shout, it waits. It holds memory, devotion, history, all without motion. It teaches patience, endurance, permanence. Close your eyes. See the fresco stretching above, colours glowing in candlelight. Feel the stillness of marble figures, the hush of centuries gathered in stone. The art cannot move, but it moves you. Its silence draws you into deeper silence, guiding your breath, slowing your heart. You rest beneath its gaze, and you sleep in its permanence. A sheet of parchment lies upon a desk, its fibres coarse, its edges curling slightly with age. Across it stretch lines of ink, not in the language of prayers, but of agreements. At the bottom rests a signature, carefully formed, the ink darker and fresher than the words above it. Beside it, a seal, red wax pressed with authority, hardened into permanence. A seal is more than decoration. It is weight given form, a decision pressed into wax so it cannot be doubted. A signature, too, is more than name, it is promise, binding hand and future alike. Together, seals and signatures create wealth without coin. They move borders, exchange lands, grant rights, settle debts. In quiet chambers, long after the shouting of negotiations has faded, the documents remain. They sit in boxes, rolled carefully, tied with ribbon. Their wax seals crack when touched, their ink fades but lingers, their presence heavy with what they once changed. Imagine a treaty signed in Rome centuries ago. Kings sent emissaries, bishops acted as intermediaries, and after weeks of debate, agreement was reached. Yet all their words would have been wind without the final act, the pressing of a seal, the signing of a name. In that moment, war ended, lands transferred, payments promised. The ink dried, and the ledger grew heavier without a single coin exchanged. Some agreements were simple: permission to collect tithes in a distant village, confirmation of a gift from a noble house. Others were immense: treaties that exchanged cities, secured alliances, demanded tribute. Each rested upon seals and signatures. The scribes wrote the text, careful and precise. But it was the moment of sealing, the moment of signing, that transformed words into reality. The wax hardened, the ink dried, and wealth shifted silently from one hand to another. You imagine the sound of the seal being pressed, the soft crack of wax yielding, the faint hiss as it cooled. You imagine the scratch of quill on parchment, the final flourish of a signature. These sounds are quiet, almost lost, yet they change the course of kingdoms. In the archives, these documents sleep, some stacked in bundles, others stored in chests. Their seals crumble slowly, their ribbons fray, but their power endures. For wealth is not always metal. Sometimes it is memory bound in ink. At night, when the halls are empty, the documents rest in silence. No one reads them, no one touches them, yet they breathe with the presence of centuries. The seals glimmer faintly in candlelight. The signatures curve across parchment like whispers of voices long gone. Close your eyes. Imagine holding such a document, feeling the roughness of parchment, the cool wax beneath your fingertips. Hear the silence of agreements that once shook empires, now folded gently into stillness. Rest in the hush of seals and signatures, their quiet authority guiding you deeper into sleep. The year was 1929. In a room of polished wood and quiet light, men gathered around a table. The air was formal, yet beneath the calm lingered centuries of tension. On the table lay documents, carefully prepared, waiting for ink and seal, the Lateran Treaty, an agreement that would resolve the long dispute between the Vatican and Italy. It had been nearly 60 years since the Papal States were dissolved, since Rome became part of Italy. The Vatican had resisted, mourning the loss of land, refusing to recognize the new kingdom. The Pope declared himself a prisoner within the walls, the Church and the State locked in silence. Decades passed. Yet now, here, the silence would be broken. The treaty promised recognition. Italy would acknowledge the Vatican as sovereign, independent. In return, the Vatican would recognize Italy. Alongside the recognition came settlement. Money would flow, not as gift but as reparation. Compensation for lands lost, for power diminished. The sum was immense for its time, nearly 2 billion lire, part in cash, part in government bonds, enough to stabilize the Vatican's finances, enough to create foundations that endure still. The Lateran settlement transformed the Vatican from landholder to investor, from ruler of fields to steward of funds. You imagine the moment. Mussolini himself, sharp in uniform, seated at the table. Cardinal Gaspari, solemn, quill in hand. Their signatures formed upon the page, the ink drying even as history shifted. Seals pressed into wax, binding the pact, turning decades of conflict into agreement. Outside, the city of Rome carried on, vendors calling in streets, children playing, carriages moving. They did not hear the quiet scratch of quills, the press of seals. Yet their world changed with each stroke. The Vatican, once stripped of land, now gained wealth, liquid and mobile. The settlement created new institutions. The money did not lie idle. It was invested, managed, multiplied. The Vatican's modern financial power began here, at this table, in this treaty. In the archives, the treaty rests still, its pages yellowing, its ink strong, its seals intact. Visitors rarely see it, yet it breathes with the weight of compromise, of change, of wealth reborn. At night, in the quiet of the Lateran palace, the treaty seems to whisper, not of conflict, not of loss, but of resolution, of wealth that shifted shape, from land to bonds, from fields to numbers. Close your eyes. Picture the polished table, the inkpot, the quill scratching. Feel the presence of men who carried centuries of tension in their shoulders. Now released by signatures, rest in that release, in the hush of resolution, in the silence of the Lateran settlement. The palaces rise across Rome's stone giants, their walls thick, their windows high, their courtyards broad. They stand not only as homes of popes and cardinals, but as records of wealth. Each palace is a balance sheet in stone, every column an entry, every fresco a notation. To walk their halls is to read history. Ceilings painted in gold leaf, marble floors polished to mirror, staircases winding upward with deliberate grandeur. Each element testifies, here is power, here is wealth, here is permanence. The Vatican's palaces are not counted like coins. Their value is not stored in chests or written in ledgers. Their value is presence. They generate authority by existing, by towering, by reminding all who see them of the Church's place in the world. Imagine a palace under construction centuries ago. Workers climb scaffolding, carrying stones upon their backs. Architects unroll plans, scribes note expenses, treasurers calculate wages. Each stone lifted, each fresco painted, each statue carved was a line in an invisible account. The costs immense, but the result enduring. Palaces absorbed wealth as rivers absorb streams. Donations, taxes, tributes, indulgences all flowed into their walls. Each gift from a nobleman might become a column. Each tithe from a peasant might become a brick. Together, they rose into monuments of silence, structures too vast to ignore, too permanent to erase. At night, the palaces are quiet. The footsteps of tourists fade, the voices of guides vanish, the halls return to stillness. Only the faint echo of wind through courtyards remains. In this silence, the palaces breathe. They are ledgers made solid, accounts made stone. You imagine standing in a vast hall, the ceiling so high it disappears into shadow, the frescoes above glowing faintly in dim light. Around you, marble statues gaze in silence. The air is cool, the hush immense. You feel the weight of centuries pressing gently. The palaces do not move. They cannot be sold, cannot be hidden, yet they are wealth, undeniable and eternal. They stand as balance sheets open to the sky, recording in stone what no ledger could contain. Close your eyes. Picture the courtyards, the staircases, the frescoes. Feel the stillness of stone walls, the hush of marble floors. Rest in the permanence of palaces, in the silence of wealth that cannot vanish. Let their immovable presence guide you into sleep. The sound of coins falling into wooden boxes has echoed for centuries. Some are large and heavy, striking the bottom with a firm note. Others are small, barely audible, slipping between cracks of wood and memory. Together they form a tide. Peter's pence, the humble offering of the faithful, carried from countless hands into the treasury of Rome. The practice began as a gesture, a gift from the faithful to the chair of Peter, a single coin from a farmer's pocket, a small piece of silver from a widow's purse. Over time, it became tradition, then expectation. An annual flow of coins from parishes across kingdoms, collected with care, wrapped in cloth, carried across lands and seas to Rome. Picture a small church in England in the 10th century. The people gather, cloaks pulled tight against the cold. The priest stands by the altar, a wooden box before him. One by one, the villagers step forward. Some drop a penny. Others, unable to give coin, offer grain or cloth. Each gift is received, each recorded. The box grows heavy. At year's end, it will be carried to Rome. Now, imagine the journey. Caravans crossing muddy roads, ships rocking on waves, riders guarding small chests of offerings. Each coin moves quietly, without fanfare, yet each step carries faith across distance. By the time the coins reach the Vatican, they are more than metal. They are prayers made tangible. In Rome, Peter's pence was counted carefully. The coins came in many shapes and weights. Anglo-Saxon pennies, Florentine florins, Venetian ducats. Scribes weighed them, tested them, exchanged them when needed. Then they were entered into ledgers, line after line, amounts written with precision. The money was used in many ways, to support the poor, to fund missions, to maintain churches, to strengthen diplomacy. Some of it went to pay debts, some to finance wars, some to build cathedrals that still stand. The uses varied, but the source remained steady, the humble offerings of the faithful. Over centuries, Peter's pence grew vast. Kings sometimes sent great sums in addition to the people's coins, eager to secure Rome's favour. Merchants donated in hopes of blessing their trade. Pilgrims brought gifts when they visited. Yet, at its heart, Peter's pence remained what it had always been, the quiet drop of coin into box, repeated endlessly across lands and centuries. You imagine the weight of these coins gathered together, thousands upon thousands, filling chests stored in vaults. Alone, each coin was small. Together, they were powerful. Together, they carried the devotion of millions. At night, the chests rested in silence. Guards kept watch, scribes slept, and the coins lay still. They did not speak, but they hummed with presence. Each coin carried a life, a farmer's harvest, a widow's sacrifice, a child's offering. Together, they formed a chorus of faith turned to wealth. Close your eyes. Hear the faint sound of coins dropping, one by one, into a box. Feel the steady accumulation, the tide rising slowly. Rest in the rhythm of Peter's pence, the humble flow of devotion transformed into power. Let it lull you into stillness, into sleep. The church did not stand alone. Around it grew orders knightly, clerical, monastic. Each order carried its own vows, its own rules, its own wealth, and always their obedience tied them back to Rome. The orders were many: Benedictines, Franciscans, Dominicans, Jesuits, Knights of Malta, Templars, Teutonic Knights. Each order gathered wealth in its own way, through donations, through land, through service. Some amassed great fortunes, others lived simply, yet even simplicity required resources. Imagine a monastery in the hills. Its stone walls rise against the sky, its fields stretch out in quiet rows. The monks tend vines, bake bread, copy manuscripts. Their wealth is not in coin alone, but in land, in crops, in books that could buy kingdoms. Yet, at the heart of their obedience is Rome. A portion of what they produce, a share of what they earn, flows back to the centre. Now picture a knightly order. Their banners flutter, their castles stand tall. They receive lands from kings, privileges from popes. They fight, they guard pilgrims, they build fortresses. Their wealth is immense manors, ships, treasuries. Yet their obedience ties them to Rome. They serve under papal authority, their riches available when called upon. The balance between wealth and obedience was delicate. Some orders grew too powerful, their fortunes rivaling kings. The Templars are remembered for this. Their vast network of lands, their banking systems, their fleets until suspicion and fear led to their destruction. Yet, even in their downfall, Rome received its share. Other orders gave freely. Franciscans, vowed to poverty, still drew donations. Their simplicity inspired generosity. The money flowed through them, into missions, into the church's wider work. Obedience meant channeling wealth, however small, back to the center. Scribes recorded these flows, lists of donations from monasteries, inventories of knights' holdings, accounts of privileges granted in return for loyalty, wealth, and obedience intertwined. To obey was to serve. To serve was to give. At night, monasteries fell silent. Monks prayed in dark chapels, knights rested in stone barracks, Jesuits studied by candlelight. Yet beyond their silence, the quiet hum of wealth endured. Land yielded crops, ships carried goods, donors brought coins. The obedience remained steady, the flow unbroken. You imagine standing in a cloister, the stone cool underfoot, the air filled with the faint smell of wax and herbs. You hear footsteps echo, soft voices chanting. Behind these walls, wealth accumulates quietly, offered in obedience, flowing outward to Rome. Close your eyes. Feel the hush of orders, the steady rhythm of obedience. Rest in the silence of their devotion, their wealth, their loyalty. Let the stillness of monastic halls guide you deeper into sleep. Every 50 years, the bells rang louder. Pilgrims poured into Rome, roads filled with travellers, churches filled with voices. The Jubilee declared as a year of forgiveness, a year of grace. And with forgiveness came arithmetic, the quiet counting of wealth. The first Jubilee was proclaimed in 1300. Thousands flocked to Rome, seeking indulgence, absolution, or renewal. They came with faith, but also with coin. Offerings were made at altars, payments given for masses, donations placed for indulgences. The city swelled, the coffers filled. The arithmetic of Jubilee began. Picture Rome during a Jubilee. Crowds press through narrow streets, lanterns swinging, voices rising in prayer. At street, Peter's pilgrims kneel in long lines, waiting to pass through holy doors, waiting to leave coins at shrines. Scribes stand nearby, collecting, recording, entering amounts into ledgers. The rhythm is constant, unbroken. The arithmetic of Jubilee was vast. Tens of thousands of pilgrims meant tens of thousands of coins. Inns filled, markets thrived, merchants profited. The city itself became a treasury, every street corner humming with exchange. Rome's wealth surged, not only in devotion but in commerce. Indulgences during Jubilee were granted freely, yet offerings flowed regardless. Gratitude inspired generosity. Fear inspired giving. The faithful, having travelled so far, rarely left without leaving something behind. Their coins became the measure of devotion, the arithmetic of absolution. The Vatican counted carefully. Each chest filled, sealed, carried to vaults. Each coin weighed, tested, noted. The ledgers filled with lines of numbers, the arithmetic precise. The Jubilee was holy, but also financial. Over centuries, Jubilees continued. Some greater, some smaller, but always the same pattern. Pilgrims arriving, offerings made, wealth flowing. Each Jubilee left its mark not only on souls but on ledgers. Cathedrals rose from these coins, hospitals were built, wars were financed, forgiveness had its arithmetic, and the Vatican recorded it faithfully. At night, After the crowds dispersed, the city quieted. The lanterns dimmed, the streets emptied, the altars stood silent. Yet within vaults the coins lay heavy, the arithmetic complete. The silence was full, not empty, full of devotion measured in metal, full of forgiveness weighed in numbers. You imagine holding one of those coins, worn, simple, carried across miles by a pilgrim's hand, dropped into a box, counted, recorded, resting now in the treasury. One coin among thousands, yet each one a story of faith, of hope, of absolution. Close your eyes. Hear the faint echo of bells ringing across centuries. Feel the hush of pilgrims kneeling, the soft clink of coins dropping, the steady hand of scribes recording. Rest in the arithmetic of Jubilee, where forgiveness and wealth meet in silence. Let that silence carry you gently into sleep. The chest is heavy, carried by 4 men across a courtyard, still glistening with dew. Its wood creaks, its iron bands groan. Each step echoes against the stones, and the weight within shifts slightly, a sound like distant thunder coins pressed against coins, bars resting against one another. This is gold in transit, wealth not resting but moving, always moving. Gold does not lie idle, it travels, across rivers, across mountains, across seas. From the mines of the New World to the harbours of Spain, from the treasuries of kings to the vaults of Rome, it moves like a tide. Each shipment carefully guarded, each chest sealed, each route planned with secrecy. Imagine a caravan in the 16th century. Mules laden with leather sacks, soldiers riding with pikes and muskets, priests blessing the journey. Inside the sacks, coins minted from freshly mined silver or ingots of gold stamped with royal marks. The caravan creeps across narrow passes, vulnerable to bandits, storms, betrayal. Yet it presses forward, for the destination is sacred, Rome. At sea, the journey is more perilous still. Galleons rocking under heavy cargo, their holds filled with bullion. Pirates lurk, storms rise. Yet the ships sail, bearing the wealth of continents toward the Vatican's accounts. Some never arrive wrecked, plundered, vanished into the deep. But enough do, and the flow continues. In Rome, the arrival is quiet. Chests unloaded by night, carried into courtyards, lowered into vaults. Scribes waiting with parchment and scales. Each chest opened, each bar tested, each coin weighed. The entries flow. So many ducats, so many florins, so many marks of silver. The ink dries, and the gold becomes part of the Vatican's silence. Gold in transit was more than metal. It was promise, a bond between distant lands and the centre of faith. Each shipment told of power stretched across oceans, of empires bound to Rome by gifts, tithes, or debts. You imagine the tension of those journeys, guards gripping their swords tightly as shadows move in the forest, captains watching the horizon, wary of sails that approach too quickly, priests whispering prayers as storms batter the deck, each moment heavy with risk, each chest heavy with wealth. At night, when the caravans halted, fires flickered against the dark, soldiers slept in shifts, the chests stacked near the centre, always guarded. The gold lay silent, unmoving, yet it carried the weight of kingdoms. Its stillness was deceptive, its value immense. Close your eyes, hear the faint clink of coins shifting within a chest. Feel the creak of wood under weight, the salt wind against a ship's sails, the hush of scribes counting by candlelight. Rest in the rhythm of gold in transit, wealth carried across distance, silent yet unstoppable. Let it carry you, too, into sleep. A long table stands in a hall dim with smoke. Upon it are spread ledgers, scales, piles of coins sorted by type. Around it sit men in robes of dark wool, their hands calloused not from farming or war, but from counting. These are the bankers, the quiet architects of wealth. Their table, the place where power becomes balance. The Vatican, like kingdoms and empires, leaned on bankers, Medici, Fuga, Borghese, names that still echo. Their tables became bridges, carrying wealth where the church alone could not. Loans granted, interest charged, credit extended. Behind the solemn rituals of faith, the quiet arithmetic of bankers kept the machinery moving. Imagine the meeting of a cardinal and a banker. The cardinal in crimson, the banker in dark cloth. Between them, the table. No weapons, no threats, only contracts and quills. The banker offers terms, a loan of 10,000 ducats, repayment over years, interest agreed. The cardinal nods, signs, seals. The church receives funds, the banker receives faith's promise. The table becomes a stage where invisible wealth moves. Coins are counted, then vanished into notes of credit, letters of exchange. A merchant in Antwerp could pay, and funds would appear in Rome. A king in France could borrow, and repayment would be demanded in gold. The banker's table bound continents in silence. Some bankers grew rich beyond imagining. Jakob Fugger, the richest man in Europe, financed popes, emperors, wars. His wealth flowed through Rome, his ledgers filled with papal debts. The Medici built their fortune partly on Vatican accounts, rising from merchants to rulers. Their tables bore witness to the merging of faith and finance. The bankers did not pray as they counted. Their devotion was to balance. Each coin weighed, each loan measured, each risk calculated. They knew the power of their tables. Without them, the Vatican could not build St. Peter's, could not fund missions, could not maintain armies. With them, it could. At night, the tables were cleared, the coins stacked neatly, the ledgers closed, the seals pressed into wax. The bankers departed, their footsteps echoing down stone corridors. The hall grew silent, yet the presence of wealth lingered. The ink still fresh, the contract still binding, the silence heavy with promises. You imagine sitting at that table, the wood smooth beneath your hand, the weight of coins before you. The flicker of candlelight reflects off scales, shadows dance across the walls. You hear the scratch of quills, the murmur of voices agreeing to terms. The silence of finance, deeper than any prayer, fills the room. Close your eyes, rest in the hush of the banker's table, where faith met numbers, where power was inked, where wealth was born in silence. Let the balance sheets fade into rhythm, carrying you into dreams. Beyond locked doors lies another treasury, not of gold, not of jewels, but of paper. The archives stretch deep, halls lined with shelves that sag under the weight of centuries. Boxes tied with ribbon, scrolls rolled and stacked, ledgers bound in leather. This is the Vatican's other wealth, memory preserved in silence. The archivists guard it. They walk slowly, their footsteps soft against stone, their hands gloved, their eyes patient. They do not shout, do not rush, they preserve. Their silence is the silence of centuries, broken only by the faint rustle of parchment, the gentle closing of boxes. Here lies everything: papal bulls, letters of kings, treaties, indulgences, lists of gifts, accounts of wars, inventories of relics. The wealth of knowledge exceeds the wealth of coin. Within these walls, nothing is forgotten. Imagine opening a box marked with faded ink. Inside, folded parchments. You lift one, its edges fragile, its script flowing in careful Latin. It records a gift, a chest of gold given by a nobleman in return for blessing. Another parchment records a treaty, sealed in wax, its terms binding nations. Another lists relics stored in a basilica, each item described, each donor noted. The archivists know these boxes. They guide scholars to them. They preserve them against time. Yet even they cannot know all that rests here. The shelves stretch endlessly, the silence unbroken, the weight of history pressing from every side. The archives are a vault of truth. They reveal secrets long forgotten, wealth once hidden, decisions that shaped the world. To walk their halls is to walk through time itself, to hear the whispers of centuries without a single voice raised. At night, the archives are darker still. The torches extinguished, the doors locked, the air cool and still. The documents rest in silence. The ink sleeps, the wax seals crumble slowly, the parchment waits, the archivists leave, their keys turning softly in locks, their steps fading into distance. You imagine yourself standing there, alone, the shelves towering on every side. You run your fingers along leather spines, feel the dust of centuries cling to your hand. You open a ledger and see numbers written 500 years ago, still clear, still precise. The silence deepens, and you feel the weight of memory settle upon you. The archivist's silence is not emptiness. It is fullness beyond measure. It is the sound of centuries held in trust, waiting for eyes to read, for minds to remember. Close your eyes. Picture the endless shelves, the parchment stacked high, the ink whispering stories you cannot hear but can feel. Rest in that silence, vast and patient. Let the archivist's silence carry you deeper into the archives of your own mind, into dreams that hold their own treasures. In the dim glow of candlelight, a ledger lies open. Its pages are thick, its ink dark, its handwriting precise. Yet not every line is clear. Some entries are written in code, others in symbols, some left deliberately vague. These are the ledgers of shadow books that record wealth without revealing it fully, where numbers hide as much as they reveal. Every treasury has two faces, the one shown and the one concealed. The Vatican was no different. One ledger might record official gifts, indulgences, tributes. Another, less visible, tracked loans, private donations, payments made discreetly to secure silence, to bind alliances, to reward loyalty. The shadow ledger did not sit on open shelves. It rested in locked chests, known only to a few. Imagine a scribe chosen for this work, his face pale in lamplight, his hand steady but tense. He dips his quill, hesitates, then writes not the donor's name, but a mark, a sign known only to his master. A crown might mean a king, a circle, a merchant, a star, a noble house. The amounts are precise, but the sources are obscured. If eyes unworthy should fall upon these pages, they would see numbers without stories. Only those initiated could read their meaning. These shadow ledgers recorded not only wealth, but power. A king's gift might secure an alliance. A noble's donation might purchase forgiveness. A merchant's loan might sway decisions in distant lands. Yet none of these appear in the official records. In the shadows, the Vatican's reach extended further than words could describe. At times, the ledgers also hid debts. Loans taken in secrecy, promises made to bankers, obligations that could not be revealed openly. To admit them would weaken authority. To hide them preserved strength. So they were written in code, locked away, left to sleep in silence. You imagine opening one of these books centuries later. The ink faded, the parchment brittle, the symbols strange. You trace your finger over a line. 3 stars, a mark of silver, a figure of 10,000. What does it mean? Who gave? Who received? Only silence answers. The secrets remain, guarded by time. At night, the ledgers rest in darkness. The scribes sleep, the candles die, and the numbers wait. They breathe softly, their meanings veiled, their truths hidden. Wealth hums quietly within them, unseen but unforgotten. Close your eyes. Picture the pages turning slowly, the coded entries glimmering faintly in your imagination. Feel the hush of secrets kept, the weight of wealth concealed. Rest in the shadow of ledgers, where silence is both protection and power. Let their quiet mystery draw you into sleep. Beneath the palaces and basilicas, beneath the marble floors polished by centuries of footsteps, lie spaces unseen by most. Vaults, thick-walled chambers of stone and iron, built to hold what cannot be shown. They breathe with cool air, smell of earth and dust, and echo faintly with silence. These are the vaults below, where wealth rests in shadow. The vaults are not uniform. Some are simple, stone rooms with wooden chests stacked along walls. Others are grand, arched ceilings, iron doors, barred gates, elaborate locks. Each one exists for the same purpose: to protect, to keep wealth safe not only from thieves, but from eyes, from questions, from doubt. Imagine walking down a narrow staircase, lit by torchlight. The air grows colder with each step. At the bottom, a heavy door of iron awaits. A guard unlocks it with a key. As long as your hand, the hinges groan, and the vault opens. Inside, chests line the walls, each one bound in iron, each one marked with seals. Some contain coins, others jewels, others documents more valuable than both. The coins clink faintly when chests are moved, a sound soft but unmistakable. The jewels gleam dimly, reflecting torchlight in colours of green, red, blue. The documents rest silent, their parchment yellowed, their ink still bold. Together, they form a treasury unseen by the world above. The vaults held more than wealth, they held memory. Gifts from kings, relics encased in gold, offerings collected across continents. Each chest was a story, each vault was a library of silence. During times of danger, wars, invasions, uprisings, the vaults became sanctuaries. Wealth was carried down hurriedly, locked away, guarded by walls too thick to break, by doors too strong to force. Above, chaos might rage. Below, silence endured. You imagine the quiet of such a vault at night. No footsteps, no voices. Only the faint drip of water from stone, the cool air pressing against your skin. The wealth rests unmoving, untouched, its presence heavy. You reach out, touch the iron of a chest. It is cold, unyielding, eternal. The vaults are not often spoken of. They remain beneath, hidden, forgotten by most. Yet their silence has shaped history. For within them lay the resources that built cathedrals, funded armies, shaped decisions that rippled across continents. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of stone above, the cool of earth around, the hush of treasures resting in the dark. Rest in the silence of the vaults below, where time slows, where wealth sleeps, where you too may find sleep. Across centuries, agreements were made between Rome and rulers. They were not treaties of war, nor pacts of commerce alone, but concordats, documents, binding church and state, balancing faith and power, blending devotion with wealth. They were written in solemn words, signed with heavy hands, sealed in wax, preserved in silence. A concordat was more than an agreement. It was an exchange. The state might grant the church privileges, protection, or revenue. In return, the church might bless the ruler's authority, recognize borders, or share in governance. Each side gave, each side received, but always the ink dried upon parchment, the seal pressed, the promise bound. Imagine a ruler entering Rome, his cloak heavy, his crown gleaming. He kneels before the Pope, not only in devotion but in calculation. Words are spoken, gifts exchanged, and then both turn to the table where the document lies. The terms are clear: land to be ceded, taxes to be shared, rights to be confirmed. The ruler signs, the Pope signs, the seals are pressed, the concordat lives. Some concordats granted the church the right to collect tithes directly from subjects, ensuring steady flow of wealth. Others secured property, monasteries, lands exempt from local taxes. Others confirmed that clergy could not be tried by secular courts, protecting wealth and privilege alike. The rulers benefited too. With papal blessing, their authority gained legitimacy. Their crowns gleamed brighter, their subjects more obedient. The church's wealth and approval lent strength to their rule. The concordats were not loud. They did not shout in the streets. They were signed in chambers, read by few, preserved in archives. Yet their effects were immense. Borders shifted. Revenues increased. Authority deepened. At night, the documents rested in boxes, tied with ribbon, guarded by archivists. Their seals hardened, their ink dried, their words silent but powerful. They slept, but their influence did not. The The wealth they secured flowed endlessly, long after the signatories themselves had turned to dust. You imagine holding one of these parchments. The ink is faded but legible, the seal cracked but present. You read its words, simple and solemn, yet behind them you feel the weight of kingdoms, the flow of treasure, the hum of centuries. The concordats remind you that wealth is not only gathered in chests, not only stored in vaults, not only minted in coins. Sometimes it is written in words, sealed in wax, preserved in silence. Close your eyes. Picture the table, the rulers, the pope, the scribes. Hear the scratch of quills, the press of seals, the quiet murmur of agreement. Rest in the silence of concordats, where wealth is bound not by iron but by ink. Let that silence carry you deeper into dreams. The name was never official, yet it lingered in whispers, the Bank of God. In the heart of Rome, behind stone walls and discreet doors, the Institute for the Works of Religion quietly moved funds across borders, across decades, across the threshold of secrecy. To the faithful, it was meant to serve missions, monasteries, and works of charity. Yet to those who looked closer, it became something else, a place where the sacred and the shadow intertwined. The bank was small compared to worldly giants, but its power lay not in size, but in protection. It existed within the Vatican itself, beyond the reach of secular courts, beyond the grasp of national regulators. Here, accounts could exist without questions, transfers could move without scrutiny, and funds could rest in silence, shielded by sovereignty. Imagine the bank's inner halls in the mid-20th century, marble floors polished smooth, clerks in dark suits carrying files, the air quiet except for the shuffling of papers and the clink of typewriters. A nun arrives, her hands folded, delivering funds from her order in South America. A priest steps forward, depositing donations from a parish in Africa. Beside them, a man in a fine coat speaks softly with a director, arranging something more complex, a transfer, a loan, a discreet account. The bank carried many faces. It was the keeper of missions, funding schools, hospitals, orphanages. It was the silent partner of investors, managing portfolios, buying bonds, holding shares. It was the shadow banker of those who wished for privacy, whether their reasons were innocent or not. All of this occurred beneath frescoed ceilings, in quiet corridors where silence was as much a currency as coin. Scandals arose, as they always do, where wealth and secrecy meet. Names of bankers linked to fraud, connections to collapsed empires of finance, whispers of mafiosi laundering fortunes through accounts cloaked in holy purpose. Yet the bank endured. Investigations came and went, directors resigned or vanished, but the institution remained, always shielded, always protected, always essential. You imagine the vaults within the bank, not vast caverns of gold, but modern rooms lined with boxes, each containing papers of immense power, contracts, bonds, ledgers of transfers. Wealth not in coins, but in numbers, strings of figures recorded in ledgers and later in computers. Silent wealth, invisible wealth, wealth that could move at a whisper. At night, the bank slept. The lights dimmed, the doors locked, the guards walked their rounds. Yet the accounts remained awake. Funds shifted across time zones, transactions processed silently in circuits, balances updated as the city outside slept. The bank never truly rested. Close your eyes. Imagine standing before a polished counter, handing over a slip of paper. Behind it, a clerk records the numbers, stamps the page, places it in a file. You walk away, and in that moment, wealth has moved unseen. The Bank of God hums with this quiet rhythm, wealth flowing endlessly, devotion and secrecy bound together. Rest in that hum, let it lull you into dreams. Not all records were meant for open eyes. Within the Vatican's financial history lies mention of books bound in dark leather, stored in hidden cabinets, guarded more fiercely than gold. They were called the Black Books not for their covers alone, but for what they contained, accounts that were never meant to be reconciled publicly. The black books held the entries that did not belong in official ledgers: donations from rulers who wished discretion, payments to secure silence, transfers routed through obscure channels, loans extended with terms that could not be admitted openly. The ink within them recorded truths that could shake foundations, yet in silence they remained contained. Imagine an accountant summoned to such work. He enters a small chamber, the walls bare, the air still. Before him rests a single book, its pages thick, its spine heavy. He dips his quill, writes an amount, marks it with a symbol instead of a name. No explanation, no details, just enough for those who know, nothing for those who do not. When he finishes, the book is closed, locked in a chest, returned to shadow. The black books were dangerous not because of lies, but because of truths. They showed connections between sacred wealth and worldly power. They revealed payments to those who should not have been paid, gifts from those who could not be acknowledged, debts to those who should not be owed. To reveal them would be to unravel a tapestry woven over centuries. To hide them was to preserve order. Whispers of their existence surfaced in times of scandal. A banker's death, a sudden collapse, a missing fortune, always the suggestion that the black books contained the answers. Yet no one outside a narrow circle ever saw them. They remained locked, their silence deeper than vaults. At night, the black books rested in hidden cabinets. The halls outside were quiet, the doors locked, the guards unaware of what they were truly protecting. The books themselves breathed faintly, their pages filled with numbers that hummed with secrets. To touch them was to touch fire. To open them was to glimpse the shadow that always accompanies light. You imagine yourself standing before such a book. You lift its heavy cover, the leather cracking softly. The pages smell of ink and dust. You see a line, a figure vast, beside it only a mark, a simple symbol. What does it mean? Who gave? Who received? The silence answers. The book does not explain, it records. Close your eyes. Picture the black books sleeping in their cabinets, bound with ribbon, their ink sharp, their pages heavy. Rest in their silence, the hush of secrets preserved, the quiet power of wealth unspoken. Let their mystery guide you into the deeper layers of sleep. Wealth does many things. It builds, it feeds, it clothes, it heals. But sometimes, wealth does something else. It silences. Within the Vatican's long history, gold and silver, coin and bond, were not only used for construction or charity, but for the purchase of quiet. The price of silence has been paid more often than spoken of, its record faint, its presence undeniable. Silence was purchased in many forms. A disgruntled noble whose loyalty wavered, soothed with gifts of land. A rival cleric whose voice grew too loud, quieted with an office and its revenue. A family whose scandal threatened to spill, consoled with a discreet payment. Each transaction small on the surface, immense in effect. Imagine a chamber at dusk. A cardinal sits with a merchant. Between them rests a pouch of coins, its drawstring pulled tight. No words are written, no contracts signed. The pouch is exchanged, the merchant bows, the matter is closed, silence has been purchased. Other times, silence was global. A nation restless with rebellion, its leaders offered subsidies from Rome. A ruler tempted to defy the church, persuaded by gifts that secured his compliance. These were not bribes in name, they were called support, assistance, donation. Yet their effect was the same: voices stilled, opposition calmed, obedience assured. The Vatican understood the value of silence. It was not absence, but presence. A silence purchased could prevent war, could preserve dignity, could shield faith from scandal. Each payment became an investment in stillness, an investment in order. Yet silence has its cost. The more it is purchased, the more it is needed. The records of such payments rarely appear in official ledgers. They slip instead into shadow, written only in private notes. remembered only by those who delivered them. At night, these transactions leave no trace. The pouches are empty, the coins dispersed, the voices quiet. Only the silence remains, a silence thick, deep, impenetrable. It hums in the walls of palaces, in the vaults of churches, in the corridors of the Vatican itself. You imagine the weight of such silence, heavy yet soothing, binding yet still. It is a silence bought not only with coin, but with centuries of practice, with the careful balancing of wealth and power. Close your eyes, feel the hush of silence purchased, the deep stillness it creates, the way it presses gently against your mind. Rest in that silence, the silence of wealth spent not to speak, but to preserve quiet. Let it cradle you as you drift, until sleep itself becomes the silence beyond silence. Not all wealth remains within walls. Some is carried away, hidden, safeguarded, exiled. The Vatican, across centuries, has known this necessity. Wars, invasions, revolutions each moment threatened to strip its vaults bare. And so, treasures were moved, quietly, carefully, sent into exile so they might survive. Imagine Rome under siege. Cannons thunder outside, smoke rises, panic spreads. But in the treasury, silence rules. Boxes are carried swiftly, sealed with wax, loaded onto carts under the cover of night. Guards escort them beyond the gates, through narrow alleys, out into the countryside. The treasures leave not as plunder, but as pilgrims, travelling until danger passes. These exiles were not always coins. Sometimes manuscripts, illuminated with gold leaf, were smuggled away to monasteries, hidden in mountains. Sometimes relics, bones of saints, fragments of the cross, were wrapped in cloth and carried by monks through forests. Sometimes jewels were dismantled, their stones sewn into garments, their gold melted and recast into plain bars. The disguise was always simple. Make the precious appear ordinary. Exile was both risk and protection. A chest carried too far might vanish. A relic placed in hiding might never return. Yet to keep them in Rome was to invite destruction. So choices were made, what to save, where to send, whom to trust. These decisions became part of the treasury's unspoken art. Picture a friar crossing the Alps in winter, his cloak heavy with hidden coins, his satchel filled with scrolls. Snow falls thick, wolves howl in distance, yet he continues. The weight upon his back is not only gold, but centuries of faith. He does not falter, he does not speak. Silence protects him more than any sword. Over centuries, these treasures often returned. A chest unearthed from beneath monastery stones, a relic retrieved from a hidden chapel, a manuscript brought back from distant cloisters, yet not all. Some remained in exile, absorbed into other collections, lost to memory. Their silence became eternal, their exile unbroken. At night, when Rome rested, the thought of treasures in exile lingered. The knowledge that wealth lay scattered some near, some far, some forgotten was itself a form of guardianship. Not all eggs in one basket, not all riches in one vault. Some treasures hidden in exile preserved the Vatican's continuity through storms of history. Close your eyes. Imagine the silent caravans, the cloaked monks, the secret vaults in distant hills. Feel the hush of exile, the weight of treasures carried away to survive. Rest in that hush, the stillness of wealth hidden yet preserved, and let it carry you into sleep. There are trades that do not deal in coin directly, yet coin always follows. The selling of indulgences, the granting of dispensations, the issuing of privileges, all became transactions, though wrapped in sacred language. Those who administered these exchanges were known in whispers as brokers of souls. The practice was simple in appearance. A pilgrim wished forgiveness, a noble sought release from vows, a ruler desired favour. Each came with devotion and with offering. The offering was never called payment, but alms, donation, contribution, yet the effect was the same. Wealth moved, silence bound it, and absolution was granted. Imagine a pilgrim in the 15th century. He has walked for weeks, his shoes worn thin, his body weary. At the steps of St. Peter's, he kneels, offering his last coins to a priest. The priest records his name, offers blessing, and promises indulgence. The pilgrim departs lighter, believing his soul freer. The Vatican treasury grows heavier, the ledger thicker. Now, imagine a nobleman. He seeks to marry within forbidden kinship, or to annul a marriage already made. He writes to Rome, his messenger carrying a purse of coins. The petition is granted, the dispensation issued, the coins absorbed into vaults. His house prospers, his lineage continues, and Rome benefits silently. The brokers of souls understood the balance. Too much demanded, and devotion soured. Too little requested, and wealth slipped away. So they measured carefully, each indulgence priced not openly, but implicitly. Each dispensation weighed against the petitioner's means. The Reformation rose partly against this practice. Voices thundered that forgiveness should not be bought, that souls were not for sale. Yet behind the protests lay truth. The practice had filled chests, financed cathedrals, powered missions. Wealth flowed through indulgence as water through aqueducts. To deny it was to deny history itself. You imagine the scribes who recorded these transactions. Their quills moved steadily, their ink drying into columns of names and amounts. They did not question, they did not judge, they recorded. The forgiveness offered was between God and man. The coins offered were between man and Rome. The two met in silence. At night, the brokers' tables emptied. The coins stacked neatly, the parchments rolled, the chests closed. Yet the air still hummed with the echo of voices, pilgrims praying, nobles negotiating, rulers petitioning. The silence grew thick, heavy with unseen exchanges. Close your eyes. Hear the faint clink of coins placed on altars, the murmur of prayers, the scratch of quills. Feel the stillness of these exchanges, the hush of wealth tied to forgiveness. Rest in that hush, where souls and coins once intertwined, where silence carried both heaven and earth. Not all gifts were public. For every grand donation celebrated in ceremonies, for every king's offering recorded in ledgers, there were gifts given in secret. Anonymous benefactors, hidden patrons, silent donors, their wealth flowed unseen, their names unspoken, their motives unknown. These hidden benefactors shaped the Vatican as much as any crown or council. Some gave out of fear. Hoping to atone, they sent gold quietly, asking no recognition, desiring only peace of conscience. Others gave out of ambition, masking their names to avoid scandal, ensuring their gift still carried influence while hiding its source. Still others gave out of pure devotion, unwilling for their generosity to become spectacle. Imagine a chest arriving at a Vatican gate at dawn. No bearer identified, no note attached. The guards receive it, open it, and find coins stacked neatly, jewels wrapped in cloth. They deliver it to the treasury, where scribes record the amount, but leave the donor's space blank. The chest disappears into vaults. The gift lives, the giver vanishes. Hidden benefactors often worked through intermediaries. A merchant delivering on behalf of an unnamed patron. A lawyer handling estates without revealing connections. A priest entrusted with donations he could not disclose. These layers of secrecy preserved the donor's silence while ensuring Rome received the wealth. The motives were many. A ruler wishing to conceal his dealings from rivals. A family hiding generosity during times of persecution. A banker moving funds discreetly, laundering intentions as well as coins. Yet always the Vatican accepted. Wealth has no voice of its own. It flows where guided, whether openly or in shadows. Some of the greatest works were built with such gifts. A chapel financed by a donor never acknowledged. A mission sustained by offerings whose origin no one knew. Even entire institutions owed their existence to hidden benefactors whose names faded before the ink dried. At night, the chests rested quietly, the jewels gleamed faintly, the parchments recorded numbers without names. The silence grew deeper with each anonymous gift, the wealth thicker, the identity thinner. The treasury hummed with invisible voices, unspoken gratitude, unknown intentions. You imagine lifting a parchment and seeing the blank space where a name should be. Only numbers recorded, the ink firm, the line silent. You feel the weight of mystery, the presence of generosity wrapped in secrecy. Close your eyes. Picture the gifts arriving quietly, carried through shadows, disappearing into vaults. Feel the hush of hidden benefactors, the quiet flow of wealth without faces. Rest in that hush, where silence itself becomes the greatest donor of all. The road to Rome was never empty. From the north, from the south, across mountains and plains, pilgrims walked. They carried staffs, wore cloaks faded by sun and rain, and in their hands, or hidden within their belts, they carried coins. Not many, sometimes only a few, polished by touch, guarded as treasures. Yet when multiplied by thousands upon thousands of pilgrims, these coins became rivers flowing toward the Vatican. Pilgrimage was devotion, but devotion had its weight. The roads were long, and inns required payment. Food cost money. Guides demanded coin, and offerings at shrines expected gifts. By the time the pilgrims reached Rome, their purses were lighter. Still, each one saved something for the final act. The donation at the tomb of Peter, the offering before the altar, the coin dropped silently into a box. Imagine the year 1300, the first Jubilee. The city overflowed with travellers, streets choked with bodies, the air filled with dust and incense. Pilgrims pressed toward basilicas, their coins clutched in tired hands. Priests held out boxes. The sound of coins striking wood never ceased. The treasury swelled with the devotion of multitudes. A single penny from a farmer in France, another from a widow in Germany, another from a merchant's apprentice in Spain, all gathered, all counted, all transformed into the wealth of Rome. Coins of pilgrimage were unlike taxes or tributes. They carried stories, sweat, sacrifice. A father might give the last copper he had, his family's winter uncertain. A mother might offer a small silver piece, earned through endless weaving. A child might place a single coin, polished bright with hope. Each gift was small. Together, they built cathedrals, financed missions, sustained the Vatican's power. The coins came in every shape: deniers, pfennigs, florins, dirhams, carried by travellers from far-off lands. Scribes weighed them, tested them, sometimes melted them into new forms. The origin mattered less than the act. Each coin represented a soul, a step in faith's long procession. At night, after the pilgrims slept on straw mats in crowded halls, the coins remained awake. Stacked in boxes, counted by candlelight, they whispered of countless journeys. Their edges bore the marks of hands. Their surfaces carried the polish of hope. The silence around them was not empty, but full of prayers, full of fatigue, full of longing. You imagine yourself among them, kneeling at the altar, pressing a coin into the box. The sound is small, yet it joins 1,000 others. Together they rise, not as noise, but as a tide of quiet faith. Close your eyes. Hear the faint rhythm of coins falling, the hush of pilgrims praying, the silence of offerings gathered. Rest in that silence, the peace of knowing even the smallest gift joins a greater whole. Let the coins of pilgrimage guide you into dreams. In dim chapels and hidden reliquaries, fragments of bone, scraps of cloth, drops of blood, pieces of wood rest in ornate containers. They are relics, objects tied to saints, martyrs, Christ himself. Their value is not measured in gold or silver, yet they became currency in their own right. Faith and wealth intertwined in ways both profound and silent. A relic was more than memory. It was presence. To own one was to carry power, to attract pilgrims, to gather offerings. A church with a relic grew rich not only in spirit, but in coin. Pilgrims travelled miles to touch a bone, to gaze upon a fragment. They left donations, filled alms boxes, paid for candles. The relic itself remained still, yet around it, wealth gathered like water around a spring. Imagine a cardinal in the 13th century, opening a chest to reveal a reliquary golden, encrusted with jewels, holding within a small shard said to be of the true cross. The object itself is tiny, almost invisible. Yet its presence draws kings and peasants alike. Coins spill upon the floor before it. Nobles pledge estates for its housing. Monks write its history, preserving its aura. Relics also moved across borders. They were gifted to secure alliances, traded to cement loyalties, even ransomed during wars. A saint's finger might travel from Constantinople to Rome, exchanged for gold. A martyr's skull might be given by a ruler to a pope, securing eternal favour. Each transfer was both sacred and financial, both spiritual and material. The relics became a form of invisible currency. They could not be minted or melted, but they drew wealth wherever they were housed. A church without relics struggled, a church with them prospered. The Vatican knew this, guarded its relics, and distributed them carefully, ensuring the balance of devotion and revenue across Christendom. At night, the relics rested in silence. The reliquaries gleamed faintly in candlelight, their contents unseen, their presence immense. The pilgrims slept, their coins already counted. The relics breathed without sound, drawing devotion without motion. You imagine yourself standing before one, the reliquary heavy with gold, yet the fragment inside small and fragile. You lean close, whisper a prayer, leave a coin. The silence deepens, your breath slows, and you feel the relic's quiet pull. Close your eyes. Picture the stillness of relics, the hush of pilgrims gathered, the quiet exchange of faith for wealth. Rest in that stillness. Let the relic's silence enfold you, guiding you gently into sleep. Upon the Pope's hand rests a ring gold, engraved with the image of Peter casting his net. It is called the fisherman's ring, symbol of authority, seal of decisions, token of succession. Yet it is more than symbol. It is currency in its own way, a piece of wealth and power that transcends metal. The ring was used to seal documents, its imprint pressed into wax, confirming bulls, letters, decrees. Each seal was worth more than treasure, for it carried authority. To receive a document bearing its imprint was to receive binding truth. To counterfeit, it was unthinkable, punishable by death. Imagine the ceremony of destruction. When a pope dies, the ring is crushed, the gold bent, the seal broken, its authority ended. Silence fills the chamber as the hammer falls. The pieces are kept, but the power is gone. A new ring will be forged, a new pope will wear it, and the cycle will continue. The fisherman's ring is wealth not in coins, but in trust. It could secure armies, for a sealed bull might call crusade. It could raise fortunes, for a decree could grant lands or collect tithes. It could silence voices, for a papal order sealed in wax-ended debates. The ring turned faith into command, command into wealth, wealth into silence. At times, the ring itself became part of ceremonies. Kings knelt to kiss it, their lips touching gold, their loyalty pledged. Merchants sought blessing through its touch. Nobles offered gifts, hoping to secure favour. The ring gleamed in candlelight, its small surface reflecting vast power. At night, the ring rested upon a hand folded in prayer, its gold warmed by skin, its engraving worn smooth by years. The Pope slept, but the ring's presence remained. In the silence of chambers, it lay as both jewel and authority, wealth and command. You imagine holding it. The weight is modest, the gold cool against your palm, yet as you look at it, you feel the centuries within, the power it carried, the wealth it commanded. The silence surrounding it is immense. Close your eyes. Picture the fisherman's ring glinting softly, its seal pressed into wax, its authority echoing through time. Rest in its hush, the quiet authority that does not shout but endures. Let it draw you deeper into sleep, where symbols themselves become wealth. In a quiet courtyard, centuries ago, the ring of hammer upon metal echoed against stone. Sparks flew, the smell of molten silver filled the air, and coins slid fresh from the dies. This was the papal mint, where faith and finance merged in circles of metal. Coins were struck not in kings' names, but in the popes, carrying both sacred imagery and worldly authority. The mint was more than workshop. It was proclamation. Each coin bore designs carefully chosen crosses, keys, saints, portraits of popes. Each struck piece travelled through markets, through villages, through kingdoms, carrying Rome's imprint into daily life. The faithful touched the papal seal not only in cathedrals, but in their purses. Imagine standing at the edge of the mint in the 15th century. Workers sweat beside furnaces, pouring molten silver into moulds. Others hammer dies into blanks, the sharp crack resounding like bells. A coin falls free, warm, gleaming, its surface marked with the crossed keys of Peter. It cools quickly, then is tossed into a pile. That single coin may pay a baker, fund a mason, or travel across borders in a merchant's sack. The papal mint was not vast like imperial mints. Its production was careful, deliberate, yet its impact was immense. To mint one's own coinage was to declare sovereignty. The Pope's coins stood beside those of kings, proof that the Vatican was not merely spiritual authority but temporal power. Coins from the mint travelled far. Pilgrims carried them home as tokens, merchants accepted them in trade, nobles valued them as symbols of papal favour. Some coins were ordinary, small copper pieces used for daily exchange. Others were larger, gold coins struck in limited number, gifts for rulers, treasures for collections. Each piece, no matter how small, bore the weight of Rome. At night, the furnaces dimmed, the hammers rested, the dies cooled, yet the coins remained awake. They whispered in the purses of merchants, clinked in the bowls of pilgrims, glittered in the chests of nobles. Each carried a silent message. The Pope ruled not only souls but commerce. You imagine holding such a coin, its surface worn smooth, its edges irregular, yet its symbols still visible. You feel the weight of centuries, the authority pressed into metal. The silence around it deepens. Close your eyes. Picture the mint at work, the sparks flying, the hammers striking, the coins cooling. Rest in that rhythm, the steady creation of circles of faith and power. Let the hush of minted coins carry you into sleep. Across Italy and beyond, vast stretches of land once bore the mark of papal authority. Vineyards rolling under the sun, olive groves shimmering in the wind, fields heavy with wheat. These were papal estates, lands not merely owned but ruled, their revenues flowing directly into Rome's treasuries. The estates were wealth in a form older than coins. They yielded harvests, bred livestock, provided rents. Families worked the soil, their labour sustaining not only themselves, but the Vatican itself. Grain became bread for priests, wine filled chalices, olive oil burned in lamps before altars. The estates fed devotion as well as coffers. Imagine walking through one such estate in the 17th century. A villa stands at its centre, its walls pale against the green of vines. Peasants bend over rows of grapes, their hands stained purple at harvest. Carts creak under the weight of wheat, oxen pulling slowly toward granaries. Overseers record the yields, tally the rents, prepare the portion destined for Rome. The estates were not merely agricultural, they were symbols of authority. Castles rose on hills, monasteries stood within groves, churches dotted the fields. Each estate carried both economic and spiritual weight. To live upon papal land was to live under papal shadow, bound by both tithe and prayer. At times, estates expanded, nobles gifted land in exchange for blessing. families unable to pay debts, ceded fields. Borders shifted as treaties confirmed papal rights. By the height of their reach, the papal estates stretched across much of central Italy, their revenues vast, their silence profound. But estates also brought conflict. Local rulers resented papal authority, peasants rebelled under heavy rents, armies marched to claim disputed ground. Yet, through centuries, the Vatican maintained its holdings, sometimes with force, sometimes with diplomacy, always with the steady rhythm of harvests. At night, the estates grew still. Fields lay dark under moonlight, olive branches swayed gently, vines rested after labour. In villas, overseers slept beside locked chests of coins, records stacked on tables. The silence of land was different from the silence of vaults it was living, breathing, enduring. You imagine standing in such a field at dusk, the air heavy with the scent of earth, the sky glowing faintly, the vines whispering in wind. Beneath your feet lies wealth, not in coin, but in soil. Above you, the stars stretch endless, indifferent yet eternal. The estates breathe quietly, their silence wrapping you. Close your eyes, picture the rolling fields, the villas, the peasants at rest. Feel the hush of land as wealth, the quiet authority of soil. Rest in that silence, the timeless wealth of papal estates, guiding you into dreams. In the modern age, wealth shifted form. No longer chests of coin, no longer only lands or jewels. It became numbers, balances, accounts, whispered across borders. Among these were accounts known quietly as concordia, accounts of agreement, accounts of discretion, accounts that moved silently through the 20th century. The concordia accounts were not official pronouncements. They were arrangements, funds placed in trust, names concealed, access restricted. Sometimes for missions abroad, sometimes for political aims, sometimes for reasons unspoken. They were the heirs of the shadow ledgers, adapted to modern systems. Imagine a banker in the 1970s. He sits behind a polished desk, the blinds drawn. Across from him, a monsignor in simple black places, a folder upon the table. Inside are instructions, funds to be transferred, accounts to be opened under coded names, balances to be shifted offshore. The banker nods, no questions asked. The Concordia account is created. Such accounts could shelter fortunes, donations from rulers wary of public scrutiny, investments held for religious orders seeking anonymity, reserves set aside for contingencies never explained. They existed in banks across Europe, sometimes linked to the Vatican Bank, sometimes floating beyond even its grasp. Their silence was their strength. Scandals occasionally revealed glimpses. Investigators found accounts under aliases, movements of millions unexplained, trails that ended in silence. Questions were asked: were these funds for charity, or for politics, or for shadows? The answers never came clearly. The accounts remained, protected by walls of sovereignty and secrecy. At night, the numbers shifted invisibly. Computers processed transfers, balances updated quietly. The world slept while wealth moved. No chests, no coins, no jewels. Just digits, intangible yet powerful, crossing borders without sound. The silence of modern finance, colder and sharper than that of ancient vaults. You imagine opening a file marked Concordia. Inside are statements, lines of figures, coded names. The ink is clean, the paper white, yet the meaning is opaque. You feel the weight of wealth without form, presence without body, authority without face. Close your eyes. Picture the accounts drifting like clouds, balances shifting unseen, wealth flowing silently through circuits. Rest in that silence, the hush of numbers moving in shadows. Let it carry you, like the currents of finance themselves, deeper into sleep. In the 20th century, a new kind of altar was raised, not of marble, not of stone, but of numbers and signatures. These were offshore accounts, vaults without walls, temples of finance, hidden behind the facades of distant islands and discreet banks. Here, wealth could rest unseen, beyond the reach of governments, beyond the eyes of auditors. The Vatican, like kings and corporations, knew their silence well. Offshore was a word of shadows. It meant secrecy disguised as neutrality, legality cloaked in invisibility. To move funds offshore was to place them in exile, not forever, but for protection. Protection from scrutiny, from taxation, from disclosure. It was exile chosen freely, exile made profitable. Imagine a banker's office in Geneva. The desk is polished wood, the curtains drawn. A Vatican representative sits quietly, his black suit unremarkable, his briefcase closed. A signature is exchanged, a code name entered into ledgers, and funds begin their silent journey. They leave Italy, cross borders not by caravan or galleon, but by lines of ink, and later by electronic signal. They arrive in accounts known only to a few, resting beneath names that mean nothing to outsiders. The offshore altars were not only for hiding, they were for movement. From one bank to another, from one island to another, funds flowed like tides, never still, never fully visible. They financed missions abroad, supported political causes, stabilized crises. They also raised questions. What was charity? What was power? What was shadow? The answers were hidden in the silence of secrecy. The money took new forms. Bonds, securities, certificates of deposit. No longer the clink of coins, but the quiet hum of papers exchanged. A Vatican banker could walk through Rome with nothing in his hands, yet carry millions through signatures alone. At night, the offshore accounts remained awake. Servers processed transfers across time zones. Balances shifted silently in Bermuda, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg. While Rome slept under bells, the offshore altars glowed faintly in circuits and codes, alive with movement. You imagine peering into such an account. A screen glows, numbers aligned in perfect order, balances vast, no names, only initials, no explanation, only digits. Yet, behind them are donors, rulers, merchants, orders of nuns and priests, corporations seeking favor. The silence is immense. Close your eyes. Picture the offshore altars, invisible yet powerful. Their offerings not candles or prayers, but figures on paper, numbers in code. Rest in their hush, the stillness of wealth that exists everywhere and nowhere at once. Let that silence draw you into sleep. Every system of wealth has its cracks. In Rome, those cracks widened in the late 20th century. A banker named Roberto Calvi became a figure whose fall revealed shadows long hidden. Chairman of a powerful bank linked to the Vatican, he dealt in billions, moved funds through labyrinths of offshore accounts, and carried secrets too heavy for one man. His story is not told loudly, but quietly, like a warning whispered in the dark. Calvi was called God's banker. His bank, Banco Ambrosiano, had ties to the Vatican Bank, its fortunes intertwined with Rome's invisible treasury. Through his hands, money flowed across continents, into Latin America, into secret projects, into accounts few could trace. Yet, as with all webs spun too wide, threads began to fray. Imagine his office in Milan. Piles of papers, telephones ringing, aides moving quickly. Calvi leans forward, his voice low, instructing funds to be shifted once more. Millions vanish from one account, reappear in another. To him it is routine, to others it is invisible. But invisibility cannot last forever. By the early 1980s, questions grew louder. Holes appeared in balance sheets, loans unpaid, accounts unstable. Investigators circled. Calvi fled Rome, his briefcase heavy with documents that might save him or doom others. He travelled to London, hiding beneath false names, the silence around him now threatening rather than protective. His end came beneath Blackfriars Bridge, his body found hanging, bricks in his pockets, money in his clothes. Officially a suicide, yet many whispered otherwise. The Vatican's name surfaced in reports, its bank implicated in his fall. The silence around him cracked, spilling questions that were never fully answered. At night, his memory lingers like a shadow. The banker who knew too much, who carried too many secrets, whose fall revealed glimpses of offshore altars, black books, silent accounts. His story became legend, half fact, half rumour, yet always heavy with the weight of wealth unseen. You imagine standing at Blackfriars Bridge at dawn. The river moves slowly, the city wakes, the air heavy with fog. Beneath the bridge, silence lingers. The water reflects faint light, carrying secrets away. You feel the weight of bricks, the hush of unanswered questions. Close your eyes. Rest in that hush, the silence of a banker's fall, the reminder that even wealth wrapped in secrecy can unravel. Let the fog of his story drift into your dreams, carrying you into sleep.